Inside the baths, they had niches in the walls where bathers could sit and just enjoy. Hello and welcome to this episode of Giggly Magazine podcast. I am Shanaya Wagh, the founder and owner of Giggly Magazine. And this week I am taking you right back to the Roman baths again. Yes, because there is so much to talk about the Roman baths that I thought I should make another video about it. And this time we will be talking about a little bit of the history of the baths, how they must have looked like in the Roman times, and a few interesting things that the archaeologists have found in the Roman baths. So, the last video we talked about what are Roman baths, how do you use a Roman bath, and what is the infrastructure that you will find in a Roman bath, and what is that interesting thing about the Roman baths in Bath. But this time we're talking specifically about the Roman baths. So, it's a continuation from the last podcast. So, if you are listening to this podcast, you will find the Roman baths in a previous podcast as well. And if you are watching the video, I shall link the Roman baths in the description, the previous video, and I shall also put up the card somewhere here or here. Okay, with that said, let me tell you about the Roman baths and why they have been built where they have been built. So, last time I told you how the water collects at Mendip's Point, it seeps to the almost to the core of the earth till 90 degrees Celsius and returns back out and comes at 49 degrees Celsius where the Roman baths are currently. So, when the Romans came here in the 1st century AD, they saw this spring and they thought about the goddess Sulius Minerva. Who was Sulius Minerva? Sulius Minerva was the goddess of healing, specifically the water goddess of healing. So, what they thought about was that this is Sulius Minerva's miracle. She's given us thermal water which is warm and it seems to have some healing properties. So, let me tell you a bit about Sulius Minerva before we talk about this goddess, because she is the one who is behind Bath. So, Bath was named after Sulius. Sulius, her origins are very obscure. She goes somewhat to be a Celtic goddess which comes way before the Romans. So, Sulius was so important that the bath was previously called Aqua Sulius after her. So, when the Romans came here, they thought about dedicating a temple to Sulius Minerva because Sulius was the Celtic goddess and she was the one who had named Bath, and there was Minerva, which is the goddess of wisdom for the Romans. So, together she was a healing goddess, or especially she had properties to heal you through water. So, they came here and they built a huge temple for her. So, apparently, the goddess, her statue was really tall and the space was enclosed, so there was little darkness inside and the only sunshine came from the doorway, and a bit of the light was spread by the fire that was burning in front of her. And you can imagine a typical Roman temple with huge columns and a huge tall structure of the goddess. And this was where you'd come before visiting the baths. You'd pray to her, and she was offered tablets which had the words DSM. So it was De Sulius Minerva. So she was offered these metallic tablets, and you'd pray to her. And after that, you'd proceed to the baths. And the baths had a gateway, and the gateway had the head of a gorgon. And what's a gorgon? Gorgon is a demon for the Romans. And if you'd watched Percy Jackson, you'd probably know what a gorgon's head is. And according to legend, Sulius Minerva, or the goddess Minerva, had slayed this demon and she wore the gorgon's head on her person at all times. So that was why the gorgon's head was placed on a pediment at the entrance of the Roman baths. Once you stepped inside, you'd go to the huge complex which had, as I told you last time, it had a changing room, it had a sauna, and 3 huge baths with different temperatures. And I talked about the hypercaust system. For those who don't know, hypercaust was a system which would help heat the baths at various temperatures. So there was a hot water bath, a lukewarm water bath, and a cold water bath which you would use. And all of these rooms were beautiful and lavish. For example, there was a great bath, and this great bath stood on a pedestal of sorts. So to reach it, you had a flight of stairs, four-step stairs, which would take you within the bath, and surrounding it were beautiful Corinthian columns which held up a wooden roof. And later, when they changed this roof to be ceramic, they added more beautiful Corinthian columns. And inside the baths, they had niches in the walls where bathers could sit and just enjoy the peaceful atmosphere and the hot water baths and just reminisce and pray to the goddess perhaps. This was how it was. It was huge, beautiful, and something that you'd really think about when you think about Romans as such, and that what you see in movies. Well, that was what the Great Bath was, and there was another bath called the Circular Bath, and there are records which say that the Circular Bath had a fountain amidst. So a fountain would gurgle when you'd sit in the bath, just taking it all in. That was about the baths. And when it came to the sacred spring, the spring that supplied these baths, Romans actually covered them. Why? Don't know, but they covered them, as I said, with lead and then barrel vaulted them. And this sacred spring was also surrounded by statues and more columns, which gave it a very beautiful look. And all of this again went through a massive change in the second century, almost a century after they had built the Roman baths. Unfortunately, by the 4th century, the Roman baths were pretty much forgotten. What had happened? Christianity had taken over, so praying to the Sulius Minerva goddess was something that was not done on a regular basis, and the baths were not very well attended by people, so they kind of got neglected. And by the 6th and 7th century, the walls had collapsed, the barrel vaulting that was surrounding the sacred spring had collapsed in, and they were pretty much lying derelict. Henry I, the English king Henry I, in the 12th century built the King's Bath in its place. And this King's Bath was true to its word. It had again niches in the wall, people could bathe here, and it was beautiful and fascinating. Then we should directly jump to the 17th century when the baths again picked up a bit. So they made a master of baths chair at the southern side of the King's Bath, and in the 18th century, the baths came into a vogue as a place where you would go to heal yourself. So people journeyed across the UK, across the empire to come and just take a soak in the baths. It had healing powers, and it was something that was done to rejuvenate yourself. And that was in the 18th century. So the baths became a place where you come for healing. And the famous architect Beau Nash, he was called here to build a pump room, and he encroached a bit upon the King's Bath to build a pump room. And today this pump room is the restaurant, and you will find a few pieces, I think, about the pump room that was built in the restaurant. I wasn't able to go to the restaurant, but this is what I found on their website. But the big change by this time, by the 18th century, was that the Roman baths had been forgotten. It was believed that a king Bladud had built these baths, discovered these baths, and that was what the legend was. And it was believed that King Bladud had built it, and to commemorate and to think about him as a remembrance, they had built a huge statue of King Bladud, which was looking into the baths. Then the turn came when Major Charles Davids was asked to look after the baths. And once when he was just inspecting the baths, he found that there was a leak. And he was so harried by it that he really had to see what was going on. So when he decided to investigate into the leak, he found out that there was something underneath the King's Bath, underneath the complex of Bath. And what he discovered was revolutionary, because there wasn't just something underneath, there was a humongous complex of the Roman baths that we know exists underneath the city of Bath today. It was a huge complex, as I told you. There were saunas, changing rooms, community halls, and three huge pools and places to relax. He found all of that under the city of Bath. And along with that, as archaeologists continue to excavate the baths even today, they found some really interesting artifacts, in fact. And these artifacts are, they found a tin mask in the drain, and this tin mask had 34 gemstones. Wow! And my favorite, curse tablets. What are curse tablets? Apparently, the Romans wrote curse tablets. They cursed the person, probably because they had stolen their clothes. And one tablet even says somebody stolen that man's wife. So he's written a curse tablet, really bad curses, and they were given to the goddess Julius Minerva to ask for revenge. So that was what was found in the city of Bath. And there's a huge labyrinth that runs under the city of Bath. Like I told you last time, hardly any of it is even uncovered. There is lots that is currently under the city of Bath. So there is a beautiful Georgian architecture upstairs which will remind you of Jane Austen, and underneath that surface lies huge Roman baths. So if you're going to the Roman baths today, I ask you to do some research. You can read the article that I've written on Roman baths, or even watch this video, because only then will you truly appreciate what these Roman baths did, what was the purpose of these Roman baths. And if I haven't mentioned before, the sacred spring that I told you was covered up, we don't really know why it was covered up, because this sacred spring literally spews out 240,000 gallons of water each and every single day. Today, tourists are not allowed to swim in the Roman baths, but it's something to just look at them, because they're still steaming, you know. And this thermal water that you find today comes out of the core of the earth with 40 other minerals. That being said, that was all I had to say about the Roman baths, and we covered a lot of ground. I told you in the previous video how we used baths, what were these Roman baths, what is the specific thing about this Roman bath, and I also told you about the history of the Roman baths this time, what are the few things that was found in these Roman baths, and how they fell into derelict and then forgotten for centuries, and now that we get to enjoy them, something new. Well, that was the recap. Now let me take you to the next segment, which is the quizzes. And this time, questions are slightly easier, I think. The first question is, in which city was the Renaissance born? Which city is known as the birthplace of the Renaissance? Hint, it's in Europe. Second, what's the world's oldest and largest castle that's currently lived in by a monarch? So, what's the world's oldest as well as the largest castle still used by a monarch as a residence? Third, the roof of which cathedral unfortunately burned down on the 15th of April this year? The roof of which famous cathedral unfortunately burned down on the night of 15th of April in 2019? The fourth question, which city was home to Sheikh Salim Chishti? If you watched a previous podcast or listened to it, you'd know. Which city was home to Sheikh Salim Chishti? And the fifth question is, which country's parliament stands at the same height as its church on either side of the river Danube? So, which country has their church and their parliament on either side of the river Danube, and they both stand on the same height? Name the country. And if you know the city, you can tell me the city as well. The city is famous as well as the country. Those were the 5 questions, and that leads us to the last segment, that is something to feed your brain with. And this fact was really astonishing for me, because this article was written by a guest writer previously, and when I read that article, it was like, wow, I really need to visit this place. This place is the archaeological site of Hampi in Karnataka. So Hampi is a huge archaeological complex in Karnataka which has a lot of temples and other archaeological sites to just see. And Hampi also features on your rupees 50 notes. I don't have them currently with me, but these rupees 50 notes has the picture of Hampi. And Hampi was previously called Pampa Kshetra, and Pampa Kshetra derives its name from the goddess Parvati, who was called Pampa. So this entire complex came into its full glory when the Vijayanagar Empire was here in the 14th century. And travelers like Ibn Battuta and many others have said that there was a lot of diamond trading which happened, which made Hampi the second largest city in the world after Beijing. This is incredible. Today, Hampi is just in ruins, unfortunately, and subject to a lot of vandalism. But this city was the second largest economy after Beijing. That's how lavish it was. So that was about something new I found out this week, and the Roman baths, as well as the questions. As always, you can respond to these questions in the comments below, or you can write an email to me at editor@giggly.in, or DM me on Instagram, and I will give you a shout out on Instagram, on Facebook, and on TikTok. I will see you next Friday with another amazing podcast about a new place that we'll explore. Till then, you can find Giggly Magazine on social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. There's a new account on TikTok. And there are many other podcasts to listen to if you have some time. I will see you next Friday with a new podcast. Till then, have a great week ahead and an excellent weekend. Bye bye.